In this lesson, we're ready to move past our discussion of formation of the traditional enforceable contract into our discussion of alternative theories of recovery. So it's a big refresher here, right? If you're looking at a contract's fact pattern, you get to the bottom, you're looking at the call of the question, and it's very broad. It says something like, is the plaintiff entitled to relief? Or what remedies can the plaintiff recover? Discuss what relief might be available to the plaintiff, right? Anything that's very broad that doesn't limit you to discussing any one cause of action, right? It just says, is the plaintiff entitled to relief? Well, what do you do? Well, step one, we know always, step one, you have to ask, do we have formation of a traditional enforceable contract? And we know at this point very well how to do this, right? My cats do sneak. We have to ask, is there mutual assent? Consideration, are there any defenses that could invalidate the contract? Is the statute of frauds at issue? If it is triggered, is it satisfied, right? We know how to run through a formation of a traditional enforceable contract analysis, and that will always be step number one. So if you run through your formation analysis and you are 100% certain that there are no issues with formation, right? Clear mutual assent, clear consideration, clearly there's no defenses that could invalidate the contract, and either the statute of frauds is not at issue or it is and it's clearly satisfied, right? You are 100% sure you have formation of a traditional enforceable contract. You can basically at that point skip alternative theories, at least in your head, and immediately move to performance and remedies, right? Now, if you're going through that fact pattern and you see any issues with formation, right? You're not sure. There might be a problem with offer and acceptance. Maybe there's a consideration issue. Maybe there's a defense that could invalidate the contract, or maybe the statute of frauds is at issue, right? Whatever it is, there's some problem with formation, and you have a very broad call of the question, asking something like, is the plaintiff entitled to relief? Then you have to then think about alternative theories. Because remember, in our very first video, our very first lesson in contracts, what did we say, right? That there's more than one way for a plaintiff to recover damages in contract law, right? The traditional enforceable contract is the main way. This is what we spend 90% of our time talking about. But we did say that there's all kinds of alternative theories. There's several ways. The traditional enforceable contract is one of many ways that a plaintiff can recover, right? So what we're saying here is, in the big picture flow of our analysis, if we have a very broad call of the question asking, is the plaintiff entitled to relief? Well, we want to start with our big heavy hitter first, right? Do we have formation of the traditional enforceable contract? But if not, right, there's a problem with mutual assent, consideration, defenses, or the statute of frauds, whatever it is. That doesn't mean that it's impossible for the plaintiff to recover any relief, right? The plaintiff may still be able to recover, or may still be entitled to some form of relief under an alternative theory of recovery, okay? And the big three that we have here that we really want to keep in mind as we're reading contracts, fact patterns, by far the most tested alternative theories are going to be promissory estoppel, quasi-contract, and moral obligations with a subsequent promise, right? PQM. If you want a mnemonic staying on cat theme, I like to use pouncing quells mice, right? Promissory estoppel, quasi-contract, and moral obligations with a subsequent promise. So in this lesson, what we really just want to do is do a quick overview of these three alternative theories, and then we need to do a very, very brief discussion of remedies, because alternative theories does affect our remedies discussion in a lot of ways. So we just want to talk about some very broad strokes concepts here, but after this lesson, of course, we're going to jump into way more detail in all of these topics. So all I want to do though is very briefly overview, right? So promissory estoppel, quasi-contract, and moral obligations with a subsequent promise. These are our big three alternative theories where we're saying in our big picture flow, there was some problem with formation of the traditional enforceable contract, but we know that doesn't mean the analysis is over. The plaintiff may still be entitled to relief if they can successfully assert an alternative theory of recovery. Here's our big three. right? So let's just overview these. And by the way, just as the theme here, right, to give you the backdrop, the big theme here with all of these alternative theories is going to be this idea of justice, equity, fairness. What the court is saying with all three of these alternative theories is, okay, we know that you didn't have a traditional enforceable contract. For whatever reason, something happened, you do not have a traditional enforceable contract. But given your fact pattern, we think it would be unfair, inequitable, or unjust to not allow this plaintiff some form of recovery given what has happened, right? So all of these three things, right, these alternative theories are all rooted in this concept of fairness, justice, equity. And I think it is important to keep that in the back of your head as you go through that, because all of these are going to have elements that deal with this idea of fairness, right? So just something to think about generally as you're reading a fact pattern, right? If you see a problem with formation, right, of the traditional enforceable contract, but something looks really unfair for the plaintiff, that's really usually a big indicator, right, that we probably have an alternative theory we need to think about, okay? So let's just quickly run through these and then we'll dive into all of the elements and everything we need to think about in a lot of detail. So number one, we have promissory estoppel. Promissory estoppel is really straightforward. This is when the promisee relies on a promise reasonably and foreseeably to their detriment, right? The promisor makes some sort of promise. For whatever reason, that promise or set of promises or agreement does not rise to the level of a traditional enforceable contract. Nonetheless, the promisee relies on that promise to their detriment, right? Both reasonably and foreseeably. That's what promissory estoppel is going to look like. Quasi-contract is where one party confers a benefit to the other side with the expectation that they're going to be paid, but of course they don't get paid, and it's in a situation where it would be unfair to let the other side hold on to the benefit without paying the other party, right? It's what quasi-contract is going to look like, and the idea here is unjust enrichment, right? The other side who's receiving this benefit, we're saying has received unjust enrichment, right? They've received a benefit that they didn't have to pay for. The question is, under quasi-contract, is it fair to let them hold on to this benefit without compensating the other side? Moral obligation with a subsequent promise is just the idea that sometimes, right, and this almost deals exclusively with this idea of past consideration. Remember we said when we talked about consideration that a promise to pay somebody or a promise to, and usually it is pay somebody or give something to somebody for some action that they've already performed is not going to be valid consideration. We call that past consideration. Remember the example I gave was I was giving a contracts lesson, I have a heart attack, hit the ground, a student rushes over, saves my life, resuscitates me. I'm so grateful that this student has saved my life that I promised to pay them $100. Remember we said that's past consideration. That's not valid consideration. So we can't have a traditional enforceable contract under that fact pattern, right? Because that's past consideration. Past consideration is not valid consideration. So what we do there is sometimes we say, okay, well, past consideration is not a traditional enforceable contract, but if it's supported by a very strong moral obligation, like you've saved someone's life or whatever it is, and we'll talk about what these moral obligations could look like. If there's such a strong moral obligation, the court may still enforce that promise anyways, even though it's past consideration, not valid consideration. But these are our big three, right? Promissory estoppel, quasi-contract, and moral obligation plus a subsequent promise. And we're going to jump into all of these in a lot of detail in a minute here. One other thing though, I just want to briefly overview before we start jumping into a lot of examples and the elements and the nitty-gritty of these three alternative theories is this idea of remedies, right? So remedies, we're going to break up into two major categories. When we get to our discussion of remedies, we're going to talk about monetary damages and equitable relief, right? So usually in contracts, our first remedy we want to think about is monetary damages. And usually there's a hierarchy of damages, right? We have three major types that the plaintiff can usually think about. And there's more than these three, right? We have liquidated damages. There's other types, punitives, of monetary damages that could be available, but these are the big three, right? And usually, if we're thinking about these as a hierarchy, and this is generally, this is not always, but generally, the most amount of money that a plaintiff could be entitled to is going to be through expectation damages, right? If the plaintiff cannot get expectation damages for whatever reason, usually the next highest form of damages from a monetary perspective are reliance damages, and the lowest is usually restitutionary recovery. And all that I want to note now, just so that we have it in the back of our head, is usually, and remember, expectation damages is the most. Usually plaintiffs want to go for expectation damages because that's the most money they can usually get, right? And as another note, right, you obviously can't recover all three. The plaintiff has to seek one of the three, right? Their expectation, reliance, or restitution. You can't go after all of them, right? So what does that mean though? Most of the time, right, the plaintiff wants expectation damages. That's what they're going to seek. The only note I want to make here is that usually under alternative theories, expectation damages are not going to be available to the plaintiff. Usually, and this isn't always, but usually the only way in contracts that a plaintiff is going to be entitled to expectation damages is if they can show breach of a traditional enforceable contract. When we start dealing with alternative theories, the court is usually going to limit the amount of damages as to what justice requires, to what would be fair. Remember, the theme here is fairness. So if it's fair under the circumstances to give the plaintiff expectation damages, a court may be inclined to do that. But most of the time, and as we go through examples, you'll see this, that usually if we're only looking at what justice requires, that limit is there's going to be limits put on the amount of damages the plaintiff can recover. And very easy to remember for promissory estoppel, remember we're thinking detrimental reliance, the court is going to limit the damages usually to the losses incurred in reliance on the promise. We call this reliance damages, and that's usually what's going to be available for promissory estoppel. And then when we get to quasi-contract and unjust enrichment, that's going to be limited even more to usually only restitutionary recovery. Restitutionary recovery is kind of like getting a refund, right? It's getting the economic value, whatever that benefit you confer to the other side. If you're getting restitutionary recovery, right, you're going to get an economic value equal to the benefit you conferred to the other side. So it's kind of like you go to the store, you buy a shirt, you give the store the shirt back. What do? They give you back the economic value of the shirt, right? You conferred a benefit to one side, you get that exact amount back, right? That's restitutionary recovery. But we'll talk more about remedies as we go through these three. I'm just going to quickly erase what we have here on the board, put up some elements for promissory estoppel, and we'll jump into that. So I'll be back in a minute, guys, and we can jump into promissory estoppel. Thank you so much for watching this video preview of our Legal Education Accelerator Program, or LEAP for short. If you would like to see the conclusion of this video and gain full access to our entire 1L and 2L video library, integrated outlines, streamable audio versions, additional practice exams with explanations, and much more, we invite you to head over to our website and join the thousands of law students who have already enrolled. To get started with your no-risk free trial today, simply click the link in the description box below or visit www.studicata.com/leap.
Hi everyone, my name is Serena and I'm currently a law student at South Texas College of Law, Houston.
Hi everybody, my name is Shiva and I'm currently a law student at Southwestern.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle and I am a first year student at South Texas College of Law, Houston. I used the Studicata study video series last semester to help me prepare mostly for contracts, and I actually made an A+ in contracts last semester, which I greatly dedicate to the Studicata videos.
By using Studicata to help me prepare for my final exam, I was able to score the highest grade out of my class on the final and even have my essay distributed as the model answer. Not to mention I had done quite poorly on the midterm and was struggling throughout the whole course of the semester, understanding the material and keeping up with lectures.
Because of the Studicata video lectures, I was able to go into my exams with a feeling of confidence. I didn't have to worry about what the rules of law were or how I was going to organize my answer to an essay question.
I would absolutely recommend the Studicata series and their online course materials to anyone. I think that they are not like professor lectures that you might find online or other outside study materials that you may encounter. I think that the Studicata videos really focus on not only ensuring that you understand the material that you're going to encounter on your final, but they also help you to understand kind of the best method for test taking, and they really break down how to approach each problem and the best ways to tackle certain methods on testing, and I think that's really important, and I think it's really special. I don't see that anywhere else in any of the other online resources that I've found. So I would certainly recommend Studicata to anyone who is studying in law school right now. Good luck on your studying, and you're going to do great.
I would definitely recommend Studicata to anybody watching this video. Give it a chance. I'm positive that you will love it, that you will get a lot out of it, and that you will be happy that you gave it a chance. I definitely am. I know I will be using Studicata in the future.
And I cannot thank Studicata enough for getting me through my first semester of law school. I will definitely continue to watch the Studicata video lectures throughout my law school career, and I highly recommend that any future or current law student do the same.